Okay. Uh, Welcome. I think I have to introduce myself. Um, well, my name is Floort. I'm going to tell you a little bit about responsible disclosure, the events that have been happening here in the Netherlands, the developments, and a little bit about the problems in trying to get a responsible disclosure policy implemented in the government and a lot of companies. A little bit about myself. I like privacy, security, and politics. Also, I really hate politics. A bit of a mixed feeling. Lots of problems I don't like, but the challenges of politics I like. And I think the last about 2 years I've been working on trying to improve the relationship between hackers, governments, and companies. Uh, yeah, mostly partly because I myself have tried to report some security issues and see what happens. Luckily, I've not encountered really bad stuff for myself, but I've seen some things and seen some things in my surroundings that I thought needed improvement. So I think this was an observation of mine that really triggered my response for myself. For there should be there should be some change. The risk of abusing a security problem can be lower than reporting it. That's a reality we live in. That's if you find a security problem, there's basically two things that are important. You can try to not get caught. That's pretty easy if you just find it and maybe mess around a little bit. Chances of getting caught are almost zero in practice. When you contact a company to report a security issue, chances of getting caught are significantly higher. This is just an observation. At least if you assume that when you go to a company and introduce yourself, then the chances of getting caught are higher than if you don't. That's and then there's the problem of how does the company respond when you report an issue? Because there's a lot of uncertainty in how companies respond. Some companies respond really well, others respond horribly. And just to be sure, I talk about companies, also mean government and all kinds of organizations. There's just a huge variety of responses. And that's bad, because if you want to decide if you want to report a problem or not, well, it's good to know what to expect. And I think the uncertainty is coming from two directions. This is the classical black hat, white hat division, and in reality, you have almost everything is gray. There's no pure white, no pure black, and lots of things in the middle. Just don't pay attention to the exact location and order I put things in, but give a sampling of some terms. Everything is in the middle. There's no holy white hat or no devil black hat that only does bad stuff. But for both companies and for hackers themselves, they don't know exactly where they are located. And hackers might think of themselves as white hat or doing it for good, and they don't see, but maybe the company thinks differently. So where do you draw the line? What's acceptable and what's not? And to get some certainty of what to expect when you're reporting on a security issue, there has to be at least something that looks like a line. It's not a gray area, but you have to be somewhat sure that when you report something, you're not on the black side of the line. The company will probably think that it's okay. So that's the first thing I want to fix. And if you look at all the laws and regulations and you say, well, let's try to define a really tight gray area that almost resembles a line, end up something like this. You can always do nothing if you're a hacker and you don't want to cross the line. So this one problem, of one direction I want to go is just narrowing the gray area to give more certainty. But this is not, for a lot of people, not an acceptable situation, because then it's basically all the time you get, no, you can't do that. It's not acceptable. So there's another issue I want to solve. I just want to acknowledge the value of hackers and convince companies and governments to do the same, and shift the almost border to the black side. Allow a little bit more from hackers and get value from that. If you don't allow anything, there's nobody that can say, well, I found on some security issue, because they most definitely have crossed the line. So you have to give some room to the hackers to benefit from that. And another issue that's almost that overlaps a lot with uncertainty, but I think deserves special attention. There's a lot of young hackers who they have developed a taste for hacking. That it's really interesting, just messing around with computers, and you can do all kinds of stuff that your friends cannot, and you can brag about it. But they don't necessarily have the knowledge about the impact of what they're doing, the understanding of society, what's desirable behavior of them. They just want to mess around, and that's fine by itself. They're kids. Kids are supposed to do that. Problem is that quite a few kids can go quite far and get pulled to the black side. That's mainly because the chances of getting caught are lower if you abuse than if you do honest things with it. And I think these kids deserve a little bit special attention, and are always in the back of my head when I think about what you should do. Should you reward? Should you not? I want to push or pull these kids to the white side to let them know that they can do all the cool stuff, or most of the cool stuff, and still just contribute positively to society instead of DDoSing and whatever. So, trying to redefine the border. There's been quite a few developments, and I want to take you through them. Just give a short history of the recent developments. I think a nice starting point of the story is Lektober. There's probably most of you have heard about it, but is there anybody who hasn't heard about Lektober? Okay, I'll give a really short explanation then. Brenno de Winter, journalist, announced that he would have in the month October one security issue a day and publish about it. And people got upset, annoyed, all kinds of emotions. One thing was really clear: there are a lot of security issues. But for me, the problem it showed was also that some of the security issues that were found were reported at least in a a pretty nice way. It was, most of the problems weren't abused, and still the reactions from the companies varied quite a lot. Some companies responded well, others threatened to sue or report the hacker to the police, or a huge variety of different reactions. But it was a quite public demonstration of how hackers were treated, because Brennan de Winter would call out all the companies that reacted badly, or at least in his opinion. It's hard to judge from the outside what happened, but so that was a trigger for a lot of people to see that, wow, that's really a problem, or at least you can point back to it and see, well, it's happened there and there and there and there. So from there, and this is a bit of a practical thing that if for the people who went to the presentation of Pieter Rogaar last night, he talked about politics, hackers and hacker politics. I went together with a friend of mine to The Hague to talk to a politician about what to do with developments like this. And from that was a motion from Wasila Hashi and Arjen El Facet. And basically, it was they asked the government to search for a better way to use the knowledge of hackers without hackers falling under criminal law. Well, that was a really nice starting point, and for people who want to get involved in politics, it was a really fast and immediate and clear result, because I think this was the day after we visited that this was they put this in the Tweede Kamer, and it was accepted. So now the government had to search for a better way to use knowledge of hackers without criminal law getting involved. And from there's a bit of a sidetrack here. As the telecommunication companies in the Netherlands, they saw some developments and they thought, well, we're going to try to take the lead. So Nederland ICT, it's a big organization of IT companies, announced that most of the big telecommunication companies here would adopt a responsible disclosure program. Basically a statement that these companies will treat hackers that report security issues well, and that they will respond to them in a decent way. However, all those policies they published were, well, they varied quite a lot. You saw there was no real coordination except for the fact that they will all publish it. So I decided to just review them on my blog and just mark. I had a list of some properties I thought were important, and just put checkboxes for each company. Well, at this stage they probably were a bit scared to talk to me. So I couldn't just, I thought it would be better if I could just talk to them in advance, but I needed to do it publicly in my blog because they didn't want me to talk to them privately. But I saw pretty quickly, within I think a few days or a week or 2 weeks, that most companies were changing their policies just to get a few more checkboxes on my blog post. So I had to update it, and that was pretty nice to see that these big companies, just from random blog where nobody has heard about, they were actually reading it. But one thing was clear: more coordination is needed, because you get all kinds of different implementations, and It's a bit like the open source licenses. Everybody inventing their own license. It can be fun, but it's confusing, and you don't know what to expect, and maybe people don't really understand copyright laws, or they make mistakes, or in this case, they don't understand how hackers work or what they like, or so. So there was an example was needed. Then came the National Cybersecurity Center. It's part of the Ministry of Security and Justice. They published a guideline for implementing a responsible disclosure policy. It's together in coordination with companies, hackers, and all kinds of different people from the government. They wrote down a list of things to think about as a company, as a government, when implementing a policy like this, a responsible disclosure policy. This was not law, this was a good thing to do. So this really helps in convincing companies they should at least look at it, and that there's sensible people who thought it through, and probably also lawyers and people who understand more about policy than I do. And then there were quite a few companies that were saying, got in touch with me and saying, well, it's an interesting idea, but do you have some examples? And I can mostly point to American companies, and that's about it, except for one Dutch company, this Marktplaats, that has a responsible disclosure program, I don't know for how long, but they were way before this all started. So I could point them to Marktplaats and to the NCSC guidelines. Those weren't really practical, more suggestions. So I created responsibledisclosure.nl. It's a website, really simple. It's basically just a page of text that companies can copy and paste, put their own company name in it, and use. That's only the public part of the policy. The hard part is actually implemented in your company. I've seen mistakes where companies thought, well, that's a great idea, just copy paste text and we're done. And then you end up with them just, for example, promising they will respond within 3 days to all reports mailed to this email address, and you mail them there and then you get no response. So the hard part is actually implementing this in your company and making sure you can respond in time. And for example, if you rely on some third-party vendor of some software or hardware, can create a huge delay in response times. So you should take that all into account, and just don't point hackers to your help desk, because that's just wrong. That goes weird in all kinds of ways. And the gist of the text is basically that companies have a clear point of contact, something like security@companyname.nl, or preferably with the P2P key. I wouldn't want security problems of mine to be mailed in plain text. Explain what kinds of systems or what kind of data is acceptable and not acceptable under the policy. That can mean all kinds of different things. So you can, as a company, you can't give permission to anyone to just hack each other's user accounts. You can, however, say, well, if there's a problem with user accounts, just create a new account or use your own account to prove a point, but don't touch anybody else's account. You can also say, well, this only applies to this line of products of ours, but not our main website, because that's hosted at some web hosting company that we don't have control over. We can't give permission for you to go hack that site. So there's all kinds of issues like that you have to think about as a company. And I explained that to the on the website, that companies should think about it. And I think for the hackers, most importantly, I try to convince companies that they should explain what reporters of issues can expect from the company. So no legal action is, I think, the most important. So the statement, well, if you follow these rules we lay down, just don't touch that stuff, do it like this, and report it here when you find it. If you do that, we won't sue you or report you to the police. And also response times, and maybe afterwards, after it's fixed, the company can give you some public credits on some page from our hero hackers who have helped improve our systems. Or maybe a bug bounty. And the bug bounty is an interesting discussion, also from a legal standpoint, because you can't always actively you can't if you give a bug bounty, you're outlooking. I forgot the English word. Provoking. You can't always provoke people to hack the system. Sometimes, you can say, well, if you just happen to stumble upon something, that's okay. But if you're actually actively handing out money to people to try to hack you, that can be a legal issue. Or maybe you just don't want that as a company. I myself think it can be really beneficial, but there's some people who think differently. But from the standpoint of when I think of these young kids, they don't really. Bug bounties are nice for them, get some cash when they find security problems. But just a weird T-shirt or some goodies, or I think Marktplaats now gives out white hats for people who report security issues. Stuff like that, that's just unique, and you can show off to your friends. Look what I got. I hacked Marktplaats and I got a white hat. That's pretty cool, because most of the kids that start out this way, they want to brag about stuff. They don't do it for the huge amounts of money, most of them. They just think it's cool, and they want to show something to their friends. And this can be a really good motivation to pull them to the white side, to help them improve companies and society. So this is something I always explain to companies. Well, professional hackers aren't going to hack you because you give out free T-shirts. But people who do find security problems often think it's really nice to get a T-shirt. So that helps. Next time they find something, they will immediately just mail you, and there's already a good relationship. I have here a list of not only companies, but there's one municipality of Amersfoort. But these companies have a responsible disclosure program. there's more companies that are thinking about it internally, discussing with their lawyers, and others they reject it. But as you can see, there's pretty big IT companies, security company, Fox IT. Gemeente Amersfoort of the municipality of Amersfoort is a bit of an outlier here. But I think someone in their local government said, well, we should do this. And I said, yeah, well, okay. And they didn't really take their time, but it's really good that they're enthusiastic about it and just go ahead and do it. So I'd like to see this list just grow, and I'm not going to keep tabs on who uses who has a responsible disclosure policy and who hasn't, but I hope to see this list growing. And recently, I think the final piece of the puzzle of the hacker, government, and company triangle came out with a letter. Actually, it was an internal memo, internal letter that was leaked to Brenno de Winter. He wrote about it. Didn't really like what it said, so he wrote pretty negative piece about it. And the public prosecutor, or the OM, Openbaar Ministerie, decided to publish the letter. Because now there were people talking about it, but nobody had the real letter. So they probably decided it's wise to just get it out there and have people discussing the actual letter. The letter is pretty hard to read for a non-legal person, and I can understand the impression it gives. The first 2 times I read it came across pretty negatively. It was just, well, whatever you do, we can just prosecute anyway, no matter what a company promises. That was the impression it left on me. But I think the 3rd time I read it, there were some nuances. Because if you think about it, well, I'll get to that. There were a few, basically the statement that was the most problematic for a lot of people was that even after hackers just honestly report a security issue and the company says it's fine, the public prosecutor can say, well, we're going to prosecute anyway. They can do that. But if you read it in this context, it doesn't come across very nice. But I'll explain later why, what I think about it. There was another statement: there's no responsible disclosure if the company has no responsible disclosure policy. I don't know where they got it, but from what I understand from how responsible disclosure is, because I didn't invent it, how it came about is that you as a hacker find a problem, and instead of just publishing it immediately, just first report it to the company, give them time to fix it, and after they fix it, you can publish it. Or if they don't fix it in reasonable time, you can publish it anyway, or at least part of your findings to push the company with some PR to fix it anyway. So there's one of the 2 paths where the company doesn't behave nicely to their customers and refuses to fix a problem, was left out by the public prosecutor. But one thing they said was when they think about a case, the proportionality and subsidiarity are important factors. So they take into account that you just only hacked your own account to prove a point, or or you had no other way of convincing them that there was a problem, because you tried saying, well, if I put an accent here in my name, it gives or a quote in my name, it gives a MySQL error. If they don't respond, well, you sometimes can say, well, it's reasonable that you just say quote or 1 is 1, just to prove a point. That's SQL injection. And strictly by law, that can be illegal. But the public prosecutor can say, well, it was the minimal amount of wrong you could do to prove your point, and we take it into account. Then there's, then the big question is this enough protection for hackers? Do they still have to fear prosecution? Because the letter clearly says, well, we can prosecute anyway. And for me, it's about trust. And I try to explain this by example of a bicycle thief. Or maybe you're not a bicycle thief. But the public prosecutor can't promise you they're not going to prosecute you for bicycle theft if you didn't steal a bicycle. Because the person who has to answer the question, did you steal the bicycle, is the judge. And the judge comes after the investigation by the public prosecutor. So that's the public prosecutor can't depend on a question the judge is going to answer after the investigation. So they can only say, well, we have a suspicion and we're going to investigate. And the same, it's a similar problem to what hackers are afraid of. But the line is much more gray, and that's the problem. And day-to-day life, I have a reasonable trust that I'm not going to get prosecuted for bicycle theft. Maybe if I going through the streets with the bolt cutter and all kinds of tools to steal bikes, maybe I get some suspicion. But I have to, most people have to trust that they don't look suspicious. It's not black and white. Even if you're innocent, you can get prosecuted, but most of the times it will go well. And I think this is a problem that's really hard. There has to be trust here, and a lot of hackers don't have it. But I hope if we give it time, that will at least be an answer to, can we trust the public prosecutor to do this in a way we find acceptable? Because I only know of one case where the judge has recently has had a verdict about a hacker, and it was one of our members of parliament, Henk Krol, and that was before the responsible disclosure guideline. But if you could have read the verdict, it was pretty explicit about most important points in the responsible disclosure guidelines. So there you see the judge taking into account that it's in benefit for society for him to show that there's a security problem, and that he went too far in showing it. I don't know a lot more about it than what the judge said in his verdict. But that sounds reasonable to me. And he got, I think, a small fine of a few €100 or something. 750 euros. Um, so that shows at least that the judge takes it into account, or take it into account. So now what? We're not there yet. There's lots of things to do. There's a few things I want to ask people here in the audience. If companies have a responsible disclosure policy, you find a bug, just reward them by actually reporting the bug. Companies that have that policy, I assume, would like you to. They think it's valuable. And when there's a company that doesn't have a responsible disclosure program and you're reporting a bug, just ask about it. Well, do you have somewhere where you state how you're going to respond to this? Because I'm not really sure, or just it's convenient for the other people coming next, next people who find a problem might want to know in advance what to expect. And this gives a signal to companies that it's important for them to at least state that they're open to hackers. And then there's the organizations that don't really behave well. You can point them to the National Cybersecurity Center and say, well, it's the government suggesting you could act in a different way. Maybe you should think about it. And just like with me, I'm just some random guy. Why should they listen to me? But if you point them to this document, they might listen. Just say, well, give this to your boss, a suggestion. Let's see. Oh, doing pretty good in time. For organizations, it's pretty simple. Just adopt a responsible disclosure policy and think about how you implement it and execute it. The public prosecutor, I would still like them to talk to me and just let me explain how hackers think and what responsible disclosure is really about. And I want them to not scare the little hackers and just be open to them and invite them to behave nicely instead of being scary and strict. And politicians, and we actually have one in the audience here. I think they have a really difficult challenge, because I don't know if this can be solved in a good way. But there are some obvious problems, I think, in current law, because there has to be this gray area that can't be in another, it has to be like that. But it could be, maybe it could be improved. I've heard some suggestions. I think most of them don't work, because the way fundamentally our society works, by the public prosecutor and what I explained about the judge that answers the guilt question in the end, not before the investigation. But most of the suggestions try to mess with that, but that's almost impossible in our society. But I see maybe there's options, but I'm really, I want to know, and I want to help if I can. But so, yeah, I want to invite you all for discussion and cooperation, email here or some other day here at the event. I understand there's some discussion on Omroep. Tonight in the TV show, I didn't know about that. Okay, and tomorrow too. Tonight and tomorrow. Okay, so try to participate, or because are you still trying to? That's no. So for all. Okay, yeah. No, I don't think I okay. Yeah, I don't think I disagree. I don't. I just think I don't know a good solution yet. I don't. Yeah, don't think there's no possible solution. Just that it's really complicated. So everybody who wants to help write a new law about how to treat hackers, then this is your chance. I think we should get a microphone. Oh, okay. It's here, in the slide number 4. Yeah. Okay.
Or elect the right political party.
Well, this is more quick. Just help write a new law with a politician that's already in parliament. Yeah.
A large problem here is educating judges. You see this problem also in finance. It's extremely specialized material, and somehow we have to have judges that actually know about computers in any kind of way.
Yeah.
Likewise for finance. That's better. So I think it's a huge problem in general with the legal system here and in most countries. But this is a serious risk. I mean, you might consider not actually reaching out to a company or not actually disclosing something if it's big enough, because you might get misunderstood.
Yeah. And I think I agree in a large part, but I think there's a lot to be gained with just changing the at least the image of hackers with lawyers and public prosecutors and police, and getting them to understand somehow that there's also just hackers who want to help, that don't necessarily wear a suit and a tie and charge, I don't know, 100 euros per hour, but just stumble upon stuff that need to be fixed. And I think there's not many people having conversations with judges and police people explaining them this. They're just random people who want to help. And I think that's at least, if you have this, you're halfway there at least. Just the initial, the preconceptions of the judge, just you're a hacker, you're wrong. If you find an SQL injection, you're actively trying to hack. That's a misconception a lot of people have, that can be, I think, solved partly.
Yeah, I think the social misconception is a large part, and that's sort of where you're aiming at. But this is also a bit like a judge who's never seen a bicycle, who has to judge about bicycle theft.
That's true, but I think that's more nuanced and another problem, but harder to solve.
So, Floor, thank you for your talk. I was wondering about the following. You make a very clear distinction between the politicians and the ministry and the public prosecutor and the judge. And, well, for one thing, I don't think that all the hackers know the distinction between these four forces. And for another, I'm not exactly sure whether they know what their guarantees are there. So yes, the government is talking about policy which should be implemented and how we should approach this. But does a hacker even understand what's going on, or should they make a more concise total part? Because the subsidiarity and the proportionality, which you mentioned, are indeed a very important part of criminal prosecution. But that's nowhere in the entire guideline.
That's, yeah, I totally agree. I just, for myself, I expect, yeah, I thought the problem was bigger with companies, that the first part has to be companies who have to change at least a little bit, and that's one of the next things I want to do. Just do something to explain to hackers how to behave, and this talk is I think a start of that. But yeah, that's also a problem that needs to be solved. Like I said, just an ongoing development.
I have a small remark to make. You advised to reward companies that have a responsible disclosure policy by reporting bugs.
Yeah.
I would strongly advise against finding the bugs. Because no matter how tiny, no matter how large, there is still a risk attached to it, since a responsible disclosure is not a permit to hack and to discover the bugs. It's only when you report them, and it's only from that point in time onward that it's actually covered by the responsible disclosure guidelines from the NCSC. So there's always this gap in between where you found the security problem and you haven't reported it yet. In between, it's quite risky. Also, there would be a simple, quick fix for responsible disclosure policies. Simply permit people explicitly to investigate your systems. Because if you do that, it's no longer just a responsible disclosure policy, then it's actually no longer the criminal offense as described in Article 138AB, as in computervredebreuk. How do you translate that? Breach of computer
Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is the American equivalent, I think. But
Okay.
it's not really comparable.
So, but if you have permission, then it's no longer that criminal offense. And then all of a sudden, it's no longer risky for the hacker. So instead of saying, if you do this and then report it, then we won't, okay, that's just very complex. Instead, just say, you are allowed to do this. And that would make a hacker's life so much better.
I think part of the responsible disclosure policies that I'm trying to get companies to adopt is a short piece of text explaining you can do this, but you can't do that. And that comes as close as possible to giving permission. If a company has on their website a text that say, well, you can try to do this, but don't try to do this. Well, that's, to me, it's almost as good as permission. For lawyers, it's not really perfect. But yeah, you can't give written permission to each random individual who might
It's like some companies do is they, I don't know if this is being done at the moment, but I know it's happened in the past that companies write out a hackathon on a clone of a system they're running that doesn't contain any valuable information, and that way they can find bugs without any risk to the hackers or to the company. But that wasn't my question. My question was, shouldn't we put more effort into explaining what hackers are? Because I've had an experience where I was, well, considered guilty by association because, well, I found out a security problem, and it was at my previous school, and they said, well, you are malicious because you're a member of the hackerspace. They didn't. Well, the way they put it was because you're a member of that hacker club. So they looked me up on the internet, I guess, and they discovered that, and then they tried to use it against me. I think it's still a very current problem that the meaning of the word hacker is not clear across the nation and the world.
And that was, I think, the same as what I was explaining earlier. And for me, the focus now is explaining the public prosecutor and maybe some judges what hackers are, because that's, if it's really serious, it will end up there. For me, I don't know a scalable way to explain all different tiny companies. I once reported a security incident to a bollenkweker, an agricultural company. They don't know anything about hackers. So I don't know how to explain to all companies like that what hackers are. But the problem you state is, I totally agree. I just try to focus on the easy wins, whereas there's most to gain with limited time.
I agree. I think if you manage to convince those people that when they try to contact, for example, the police, and the police tells them, well, do your research first and check if it's really a malicious person before taking it too seriously.
I don't know if the police can say that. I don't know, but
well, I know the police does this with other types of crime, that they say, like, example, when someone thinks a person has been abducted, they have to wait a certain amount of time to prove that the person is not just temporarily unavailable somewhere. I think with hacking you can do the same. A person has to be able to make a strong case that it was malicious intent to be able to report someone as a criminal. That way you will also get that effect that the companies get the information about hackers, because they're, well, when they come into contact with it, they will learn from it this way.
Yeah, then you end up with a problem that, my mom can get hacked. She should be able to report to the police, but she can't make a strong argument that it was malicious. I don't know. It's difficult. I like to hear valuable suggestions. Maybe try to help with a crowdsourced new law. So yeah, maybe if have a time and a place or a URL or something that we can go to for that, or just pay attention to Omroep of. Okay. Still work in progress, I understand, yeah. Yeah.
So maybe you can summarize what she said.
Oh, yeah, it's still work in progress. There's some cooperation about how to, finding out if it's possible and how to do it, and there's no definitive date or time or website or.
So is there any important question? I see two people there. In the meantime, I say you can also go to a journalist and ask to cover your ass. It means to do a source protection or go to a lawyer.
I don't really agree with the first part, but.
Yeah, okay, we can discuss about it.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to mention that to maybe continue the discussion, we have a village set up. It's called Hackers Without Borders, Hackers Zonder Grenzen, to try and make sort of an initiative to ease responsible disclosure. So make it easier, act as a legal proxy, like the gentleman said there. try and have a sort of an agreement with a company that they want to be hacked, and then it would be perfectly legal and not have the well, the things you just mentioned about responsible disclosure as a policy, the steps before it, you would want to be make that legal.
That's great. Where are you located?
We're in between T1 and T2.
Okay, great.
So just tag along for the discussion.
Thanks.
So any date and time for the discussion? Right now?
Just whenever.
Whenever.
That's best.
Is there coffee? And beer.
Coffee and beer. Well,
I think we should try to end it. It's 5 minutes before. Okay. So I would like to thank Floor for his presentation. And I think he's available for further discussion. Officially, you should go to the media cafe.
okay.
Officially.
I'll have
But
to find out
do
where
whatever
it is.
you want.
But thank you.